All right, so in this tutorial, we're going to be creating a text-to-speech app. Let's go ahead and show you what this looks like. You have a header that says text-to-speech, an area where you can type your speech, and then a play button, but it's disabled now because there's no text. So if I put in a bunch of text and I copy and paste just a ridiculous amount of text here, as you can see when I click play, you see text exceeds 1,000 character maximum. So there's a little bit of front-end validation there. And also if I just put a bunch of empty spaces and I click play, it says text must contain text characters other than empty spaces. So that way you're not sending to the API anything that just doesn't make any sense. So let's do a quick test.
This is a test. Hello world.
I'm not sure if you were able to hear that through the microphone. If not, I'll try to amplify it when I'm editing this video. But this is the basis of what we're going to be building, so let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that we're going to want to do is you're going to want to go to voicerss.org. I'm going to put a link in the description, so look there. And you're going to want to sign up, so you'll click this Get Started, and then you'll enter your information. And then when you're done entering your information, let's see if I can find, you're going to go to your profile, and inside of your profile, you'll see this API key. This is what you're going to need whenever I say API key. This is going to be exactly what I'm talking about. So get that and keep that ready because we're going to be using that throughout the app. All right, so let's get started. Go ahead and open your folder. I'm calling this project text to speech, so I'm going to create a folder called text to speech, and in here I'm going to put index.html. I'm going to put a style.css, and of course a script.js file. And let's go ahead and start with our HTML. So go to your HTML file and let's go ahead and start. And what I want to do is I want to increase the font size just a little bit for you guys. That should do it. Okay, so go ahead and create your HTML tags and then your header tags and your body tags. And I'm going to indent all of this really quick. And inside of your head tags, you want to put link rel equals style sheet, and the href style.css, because that's what we called it. Close the tag, and then inside the body we also want to reference the JavaScript file, so put script, and then in here you want to put src, stands for source. You want to put script.js. Cool. So let me go ahead and pop this over here. Let's see if I can fit both of these on the screen simultaneously. Okay. It looks like I can probably fit both on the screen. I'll make this just ever so slightly smaller, and then under inspect, I'm going to open up my console so that we can see any JavaScript messages that might pop up. All right, so now let's go ahead and get started writing our HTML. So at the top of the body here, we're going to want to put a div, which we're going to use as a container, and inside of this, we're going to put an ID. And we're going to call it app container because it's going to contain all of the contents of the app. The first thing that we want to add is the header, and we're going to call it text to speech. And when I save this and refresh over here, you can see now we have the header here on the screen. It doesn't look fancy, but now you can visually see that it's there. I just opened an emoji box by accident. So now let's create another div container, and inside of here we're going to call it input container, and this is going to be the container for our input that the user is going to be typing their text into. We're going to use a text area, and we're going to want to give this an ID. Actually, I don't want to put anything in between the tags, so I'm going to keep them on the same line like this, and I want to put an ID of text input. And then we're going to have a placeholder, and the placeholder is going to be the text that appears there. Let's see if I can make this just, I want you guys to be able to see everything on the screen here. The placeholder is going to be the text that sits inside of the text area by default. So I will actually demonstrate that now. So when I refresh, you can see type your text here, ... is already inside of the text area. And then when you start to type, it disappears. It's just so you can kind of see what the default text is, or to tell the user what's supposed to go there. So that is the text area. Let's go ahead and put in another div. Let's give it an ID of control container, and this is where our button is going to go. So let's go ahead and put the button here. We're going to start it by default with this disabled equals true. That way they can't click the button without text being in the text input, because we don't want the user to be sending empty information to the API. We're going to we're going to put an ID of play btn. And inside of the tags, we're going to put play. So that's the text that the button is going to display. So when I refresh, you can see there's a button here that's disabled. You can't click on it. And it says play. And it has an ID. And we are almost done with the HTML. We just want to put a div with an ID of error message. And we're going to populate this with JavaScript whenever there's some sort of error. As you saw before when I was demonstrating the app, there was some sort of front-end validation that was like, hey, that's too many characters, or hey, that's only empty spaces. We're going to use this as the container for that. So when I refresh, you can see there's nothing inside of the error message because we haven't populated any text. But if I put some random text and refresh, you can see it's going to be down here. So I'm going to get rid of that. And now let's go ahead and style just a little bit. All right, so there's going to be an image that we're going to use here. Let me drag this over. It's this white brick wall here. I'm going to put the link in the description. This is a royalty-free image, so you can use it as you please. Go ahead and click free download, download the image, show it in the folder, and then when you get to the image, go ahead and rename it bg.jpg, and then you're going to want to drag that into your directory where your HTML file is located. So I'm going to go over here, right click index.html, click reveal and explore. This could be a little different for Mac, by the way, but it's generally the same. Drag that bg.jpg into that folder, so now it's in the same directory as all your other files for the project. Because now what we're going to do is we're going to use that as our background image. So let's see. We're going to want to go ahead and start by referencing our body. And inside of here, we're going to put background image, URL, and then in parentheses, bg.jpg. That's just a path to the background image that we're using. We're going to say background size cover so that it covers both the width and the height of the background. Margin 0 and padding 0 because we don't want any distance between the edge of the top of the screen or the side of the screen in any way. We just want the picture to completely, and all of the contents to completely cover the available screen space that we have. So when I save this and refresh, okay, this is telling me cannot find bg.jpg, and that's because I called it bg.jpg.jpg. So I'm going to just get rid of one of these JPGs. Cool. Now let's try this again. I refresh and now we have the background image as expected. All right, so we want to go ahead and reference the app container. And inside of here, we want to give it a width by, and we're going to use a manual width of 800 pixels, and we're going to say margin auto. And what this is doing is it's setting the width of all of the stuff inside of the app to be 800 pixels, and margin auto is setting it to the center of the screen horizontally. So let me demonstrate that by refreshing. And it's because I need to make the screen bigger. So when I refresh, as you can see, if I added a border to this app container really quick, so let's just say border 1 pixel solid black. And let's just come in here and refresh. You can see that this 800 pixel wide container is in the center of the screen. You couldn't tell before because this is all aligned to the left, and we'll get to that momentarily. So I'm going to get rid of that border. So the first thing that we're going to want to do inside of the app container is we're going to want to style the header inside of it. So we're going to give it a font family of sans serif, font size of 54 pixels, a text. Let me actually show you this text shadow business. So this is what it looks like currently with what we have here. So I'm going to put the color to be white. So it's kind of hard to see. So we want to add this shadow here. So we're going to put text shadow. And what I'm going to do is say 5 pixels, 3 pixels, black. And I accidentally put 34 here. You want to put 3. And when I refresh, you can see it gives it this sort of backdrop that gives it some three-dimensional depth, as if there's a light shining on top of it and it's casting a shadow onto the background. And that makes the visibility much better. Let's set the text align to center. And the letter spacing to 15 pixels. So it's going to, the letter spacing, there we go. The letter spacing is the distance between each letter. So when I refresh this, you can see that it increased the distance between each of the letters, kind of spreading it out a bit. So that looks pretty decent. Let's go to input container text area. So now we're going to style the text area that's inside of this input container here. We want to set the width of this to 100%. So 100% of the container's width. We want to set the height equal to 350 pixels so that's not too tall. I keep putting C there. Resize, none. So I'm going to show you really quick what that does. So I'm going to cut this out, refresh this. This is what it looks like currently. You see when you hover over this text area, you can actually resize it. I don't really want the user to be able to do that in this case because I want it to look good and uniform. So I'm going to go in here and say resize is none. And when I refresh, you can see that handle goes away and the user can no longer resize the text area. Background color. So here we're going to use a transparent white. So it's already white, but it's not transparent. So we're going to use RGBA, A meaning alpha, or the kind of the opacity level. 255, 255, 255 for RG and B gives you a white color, and we're going to say 0.7 level of alpha. And when I refresh, you can kind of see the bricks coming through the text area now, which I like to do when we're doing these kind of single page apps. It just kind of gives it a nice little flair. Let's do a box shadow. So a box shadow is basically the same thing as the text shadow, but it's going to be for boxes or rectangles. So what we're going to do is we're going to say 1 pixel, 5 pixels. This is going to be the X distance, the Y distance, and the spread. And we are going to set that color to black. And when I refresh, you can now see it has that same depth. Everything's becoming somewhat uniform. The border, 1 pixel solid. Let's do white. There we go. It kind of makes it look almost like it has a glow coming from it. Looks good. Set the padding to 25 pixels. So now when I refresh this, check out this text here. There's no padding, but when I refresh it, now there's padding on the top and the side, so it actually looks like it's not being choked out by the edge of the text input. Let's do font family really quick. Whoa. Okay, so for the font family, we're going to use Merriweather. And that's going to be a serif font. Now, I think, let me just... I want to verify something really quick. I apologize. Let's just check. Okay, so this... Okay, yeah. Sorry. So, yeah, Merriweather and serif. And let's go ahead and set the border radius to 5 pixels. So border, I cannot type like this. Radius 5 pixels. And let's see what happens. So as you can see on each corner, it's very sharp. It's a 90-degree angle. When I refresh now, it's got this sort of bevel to it. That's what that's doing. And as you increase that number, the bevel will increase. Let's do a font size of 24 pixels inside of this text area. So when I refresh, you can see the placeholder text is much larger. It's going to be easier for our users. And let's set the text align to center here. And watch that go directly to the center here. Cool. So now that's looking a lot better. Let's move on to the control container. Margin top, 25 pixels. That's just going to separate the play button a little bit from the bottom of the text area. And let's say text align center. And that's going to move the button to the center of this container here. Done with that, let's go ahead and actually style the play button. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start by giving it a width, a manual width of 100 pixels, and margin auto, which we may or may not actually need. So I'm actually going to leave this out for now. But let's go ahead and see what the width looks like. That looks good. Very clickable. Background color. Here we're going to set the same thing. It's going to be white with a little bit of transparent, but a little bit more transparent than the text area. So VS Code is trying to help me out, but it's not helping me out at all. Cool. So let's say 255, 255, 255, 0.5. So it's going to be a little bit more opaque than the text area. That's looking pretty good. If it were enabled, which I'll go ahead and just remove this for a second to show you, save this, it looks a little bit better. So just remember that right now it's still disabled, so it's supposed to kind of look weird. All right, after the background color, let's go ahead and say padding of 15 pixels, and let's do cursor pointer, and let's show you what that does. So right now when I hover over the play button, it's just this arrow. You see the arrow. When I refresh it now you get the hand. Text transform, uppercase. So now when I refresh this, you'll see the text inside all is uppercase now. Let's say letter spacing, 1 pixel. Font weight, 700, which is going to be a bit bolder. So let's, see, it makes it a little bit bolder. Let's do outline. We don't want any outline for the button because we're going to kind of do something a little fancy with it. Then we're going to take the border and we're going to change it a little bit to 2 pixels solid black. See what that does for us. Oh yeah, it's looking good. Let's do font family. Let's change that from the default to, let's say, Poppins. And Poppins is going to be a serif. So let's, that's looking good. Let's do a border radius so that's not so sharp. And it's a little bit more uniform with the text area because the text area isn't sharp. So let's say 5 pixels as well. Refresh that. Oh yeah, that's looking great. Cool. Font family, we already have sans serif, but let's see if I can put, or we have serif. I want to see if I can change this to sans serif and see if it looks good. I think that looks better. We're going to go with that. I don't know about you guys, but I think that looks good. So I think that, let me just verify that we're not missing anything here. I think we're good. Cool. So let's go ahead and move on to the hover. So what do I mean by that? Play button, we're going to reference it like we did up here, but we're going to add a colon and hover, and this is going to be the design that is applied whenever you're hovering over it. And I want to change the opacity ever so slightly, and the reason why I'm doing this is because it's going to become slightly less opaque when you're hovering over it, just to kind of give it this nice little flare. So when I refresh and I hover over it, you can kind of see it change ever so slightly when you hover over it. It's just a nice little flare that I like to add sometimes. Now we're going to add one more thing. Colon disabled. These styles are going to apply to this button whenever the button is disabled. And what we want to say is cursor. Instead of showing this hand, we actually want to have what is called not allowed. And it's going to change the cursor to this like red circle with a line through it that's like, hey, you can't click this button. The color, we're going to say gray to just even more emphasize that you can't click it. Even though it is already gray, I think it might be gray by default. So I'm actually going to leave this out. And we're going to say border 2 pixels solid gray. Now, I just want to clarify, the reason why it's gray by default is because whenever a button is disabled, I think it automatically changes the color to gray. So when I refresh, oh, that looks like a much better, actually, one thing I want to do is I don't want the background color to change at all when we hover over it when it's disabled. There we go. Yeah, that's looking good. Now let me come into the HTML and remove disabled just to kind of see what it would look like if it's not disabled, and that is exactly what we would want. So that's all for the HTML and CSS part. In the next video, we're going to work on the JavaScript.